what we're talking about today is map awareness. Now, map awareness, how it applies to every role in the game. So, a lot of people think that map awareness is simply looking at your mini map, which would be true, and moving your camera around the map to kind of understand what's going on, and see what's going on in other lanes, wave states, with the jungler, where people are roaming, vision, etc. All very important things, but realistically, a lot of what map awareness is, outside of just looking around the map, is understanding what you're looking at and how it translates into your games in order to be successful. So we're going to jump right into it. So the first thing that we're going to look at is we're going to look at where your junglers are going out of the base when they start the game. This is an extremely important thing in the game, whether you're playing mid, whether you're playing bot lane, or whether you're playing top lane. And the reason being is because it dictates what side of the map is going to be your strong side and what side of the map is going to be your weak side. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're looking at this diagram and you're saying, hey, but wait a second. Amumu is on the bottom side of the map, so isn't this the strong side? And it would be if level 2 ganks were in meta and we thought that maybe he's going to gank mid or maybe he's going to gank bot immediately, but realistically in the current meta, that's not normally what you're seeing. So if your jungler is starting on their red side, on bot, that means that your strong side is going to be top side. That means that bot lane is going to be weak sided. Top lane is probably going to get ganked from this angle, either level 2 or this angle, level 3 in mid lane. And top lane is going to get ganked later on, right? Now, this is important because once you understand strong side and weak side, you understand that it's either mirrored and it's exactly the same. If Nidalee was starting here, this would be the strong side of the map for both teams. This would be the weak side of the map for both teams. And that becomes very difficult because then lane matchups in the 1v1s become very important. Who has priority and who can roam first. However, if you're playing on a non-mirrored matchup like this, right, then the strong sides switch for both teams. Now, the reason why this is important is because knowing this information at the beginning of the game is what allows you to dictate if you want to do a fast push into a second wave crash, if you want to do a slow push into a third wave crash. These all have different benefits depending on which lane you're playing, and mostly you're going to see this kind of stuff play out in top and bot with second and third wave crashes. Mid lane goes back and forth a little bit more and usually stays in a more neutral lane state because you have casters who can both clear waves at pretty much the same point, and it's a shorter lane than the other lanes, which are obviously much longer, right? So once you know this and you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, what does this mean for me? Well, it means that one of the most important things you can do level 1, this is a really risky invade for either team unless you have a really good comp that allows you to kind of fight the level 1. Ideally, the easiest place to find out this information is if you can get out of base as quick as possible, go straight here, right over to here, and drop a ward right here. Vice versa on the other side, right here. Now, what this is going to do for you is it is going to tell you if the enemy jungler is starting on this side or starting on this side. And the way that works is this ward is going to last 1 minute. Unless you're playing against a jungler who is extremely bad and can't do their full clear correctly, even if they go red to Krugs, then to Raptors, you're going to end up with a jungle path that exposes where they are within the first minute of the game, and then okay, if I'm up here, I need to be careful so I don't get level 2 ganked. I'm going to play a little back if I'm playing on the blue side. As the bot laners, we can play pretty aggressive early on, but then after around that 2-minute mark, we know that Nidalee is probably crossing over, which means that we want to take a more defensive posture and play back so we don't get ganked, right? Especially because our jungler is going to be doing the opposite of this, and they're going to be clearing these camps and then moving topside, right? So with this, that kind of covers the very, very general quadrant strong side, weak side. The difficult thing about mid lane, unlike the other lanes, is that it's more important to know which side the jungler is going to come from in terms of ganking, so that you can put preemptive wards. If we were on the blue side, you want to get a ward here, maybe a ward here, a ward here, etc. here, and then it's mirrored on both sides. You want deeper vision, and the reason you want deeper vision is because if you get a ward here, depending on the jungler you're playing against, like if it's a Nunu or a Vi who has flash up or something, this really doesn't give you enough space to react to some sort of flash play or a very, very fast champion like a Rammus or a Nunu or something. So what this ward does, and this ward is going to do, or this ward is going to do, is it is going to give you time to space and see this person out probably 10 seconds before they're actually in position to gank, which gives you time to get back to a safe distance. Now, the only way that someone could get around these wards potentially, especially if we're talking about this ward specifically, is if you're playing against a champion that has the ability to jump walls, then you might want something in the river bush. But if you don't have a jungler that can jump walls to gank you and that can play around fog here, then placing this ward is really great. And the reason why placing this ward is going to be better than the river bush ward is because when you place this ward, the only path that a jungler can take to gank you realistically, if they were ganking from this side, is to go like this all the way around, which by the time they've done that, they've wasted so much tempo that even if they get the gank off, if you live, you've pretty much destroyed this jungler's ability to keep up with your jungler in the game because they've wasted so much time here. So we'll kind of move on to the next part of map awareness. The first thing obviously being understand strong side, weak side, understand where the junglers are starting, get those wards down early so you can spot that out, and then pay attention which side they're pathing towards so you can manage your lanes correctly. Which leads into kind of our next point. We're going to put stronger numbers on this specific concept. So when we're talking about this concept, most junglers can gank level 2 in between 1 minute and 30 and 2 minutes, because 30 seconds is about all a jungler needs to clear their first buff and maybe a camp, depending on how fast their clear is, which is going to get them level 2. Now, a Nidalee ganking level 2 would be very, very bizarre, but realistically, you could have an Amumu gank level 2, right? And you could do it. I wouldn't recommend it, but this Amumu could gank level 2. And the question is, how, why, when, etc., right? So Amumu's going to get his red buff, which is his combat, right, buff. It's going to give him slows, it's going to give him more damage, etc. He's going to be level 2. And bot lane has a slow, hard CC, right, level 1. And they're going to have 2 forms of CC with Amumu's bandage. So it's very realistic against a double ranged comp bot, right? These guys are going to get to auto this wave more because they don't have to walk up into melee range. If this Maokai preserves his health, they give the push, right? Staying close to the level 2, not completely giving it up. By the time Amumu gets down here, the Ezreal and Lux would probably be in a position like here. They probably did not put down an early ward. He can wrap around in, and you're guaranteed to at least burn some sums. And they're not going to be level 2 yet because they need 2 minion waves, and by the time the second minion wave arrives from the jungler's first initial clear on this buff, the second minion wave will be somewhere about here, right? So you're making this play off of the first jungle wave. But that's something to be said, that this can only happen between 1:30 and 2 minutes, right? That's your level 2 gank window, and you only know where that's coming from if you know specifically where the jungler started with this early ward. Now, to spot out a level 2 gank even better, you would probably need to get a ward on the buff specifically, because not every jungler is going to start Raptors. Now, the next jungler tracking time that we're going to talk about is going to be the 2:30 jungle transition. So at 2 minutes and 30 seconds, that is generally where the first camp has been cleared, we've moved to the second camp here, right? And then we've moved to our third camp directly after. Now, what this means is once we've done our full clear as the jungler, 2 minutes and 30 seconds is the time when your average jungler completes their first quadrant clear and is crossing over. Now, this is important for two reasons. One, that tells you in the opposite lane how long you have to play aggressive before you need to start managing the wave to come back the other way so that you're not in an overextended state where you're going to get ganked and killed. All right. Now, that 230 window is also correct. It is also important for your mid laners, right? Because if we're splitting this down mid lane and we want to know what direction the enemy jungler is potentially coming from 2 minutes to 230 seconds, it's very likely that if the junglers do a transition gank, it's going to be from this side of the lane, which means what we want to do is we want to play on the opposite side. Now, ideally, mid laners like to play in a posed position from each other, right? Where they're mirroring each other. But if you know that your jungler is looking for a level 2 gank or a level 3 gank after their 4 clear on their first quadrant, you're going to want to contest this side to try and push the enemy over to the side where your jungler is so that you can initiate a pinch in this area and look for that kill. So that's why the 230 jungle transition time is very important. Not only does it help you manage your waves in the side lanes, but it also tells you which side of the lane you should be playing in mid, right? So the next timer that we're going to talk about specifically is 230 to 330. This is where your level 3 gank window is that you normally see, or your level 4 gank window is right before Scuttle spawns. So Scuttle spawns at 330. If a jungler is really good on their clear, they have 20 seconds of dead time, give or take, where they're going to either look top or they're going to look bot in this position, right? Because we're doing our full clear here, we're moving up, we're doing our full clear here, etc. for both sides, right? And then both of these junglers are going to want this Scuttle, right? That's whoever gets that is immediately ahead of the other jungler as long as a gank wasn't pulled off. So in that dead time, based on your clear, this is where opposite side of the lane, your mid laner needs to be very careful here. And if you don't believe you have the stronger 2v2 in the side lane with the jungler and your lane opponent, then you want to pull back and not fight. Now for Ornn and Amumu, I would say that they almost have a stronger 2v2 here, depending on how they play it, because they have more hard CC early, right? So that's what you're looking out for when we're talking about this 230 to 330 transition period. Now the next thing to cover is simply that at 420, the first buffs are going to respawn. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the jungler is going to be there right away. What some junglers will do is they will get back out on the map, they will clear their side camps, and then they will get to their top camps, and they will do another dead time gank somewhere in this area. But realistically, the important thing to know about this is if you are the jungler and you see the top lane getting ganked by this Nidalee, right, at 4:15, right, and we're aware that Nidalee started on her blue side and you backed after your last camp and you're headed to your red buff, what you can do is you can actually walk right past your red buff, go into this blue, take this blue, and then come back out and then get this. And then as long as she doesn't get the kill top, we've successfully counter jungled and punished her lack of, map awareness and that she wasn't cycling her camps correctly. Now this is also contingent on the fact that this bot lane doesn't have this warded, that there's an equal lane state down here, that these guys aren't begging for a gank, right, and they're not about to die, etc., right? So there's always going to be these what if factors, but this is primarily just key information for you to digest, so that way you know, hey, these are timers that I can play around in every game. Now, if you're a laner and you're looking at these and you're like, all right, but I'm not counter jungling and I don't want to get ganked, so what do I do with my waves? That's what we're going to talk about next, I believe. So, we know what the timers are, right? We talked about that. So plan around one of the 3 options below for your lane, right? Based on this map positioning. So if Ornn's biggest concern is, I want to set up getting a gank. That's what I want. Okay, so then what Ornn is going to do is Ornn is going to do one of 2 things. He's either going to do a second wave crash, so the third wave stacks up and becomes a double stacked wave and comes back in by the time that his jungler has made it topside. Okay, now there's an inherent risk to this, right? Because if it goes bad and you don't kill the Garen and potentially the Ornn dies, he's going to lose a double stacked wave, and it's also going to be the cannon wave, right? So you can set this up, but you're also relying on this individual player in your solo queue game to make the decision to actually help you instead of just going for Gromp, right? So that could be an option. If we want to avoid a gank, we could do the same thing, except what we're doing is we're not looking for Amumu to help us. We're going to ping him off and say, hey, don't help me. I did a second wave crash solely so that this third crash double stacked cannon wave would come back to me and I would be able to farm it safely under tower, right? Because I didn't want to get ganked by the Nidalee who was coming up, right? Now, the third thing we can do is we can set up a roam for vision and objectives. Let's say that this scuttle is an objective in this instance, right? What we want to do is we want to do a third wave crash, stacking this wave that pins this Garen under tower, and then we can roam down to help our jungler with the grubs, right? Because we know that they're going to rotate up, and we know that there's going to be a 1v1 fight here. But now what we've done is we've made it a favorable 2v1 for our team, and we've gotten our jungler ahead, and we've neutralized our top lane wave state, right? Similar, you can do the same thing in bottom lane, but the more difficult thing about doing these things specifically bottom lane is you have to coordinate with a player who you know nothing about. Also, depending on the matchup, you're not going to get priority solely because of the fact that if it's a double ranged, bot lane, they're going to have push advantage because they can consistently do more damage to the wave. So you may not be able to get priority in order to roam and help with this play. Let's say Amumu is starting up here and pathing down. But what you can do is you can set up getting a gank, right? Because they're going to be shoved up. And what you can do is you can look for an all-in in an extended wave state because you have more CC. Now, we've talked about specifically the things you can do with your waves in the early game in order to set up these positions. But the other thing to discuss is what happens in the mid game. What happens when the objectives start spawning? So realistically, we're going to say Grubs is in 130. Okay, it's going to take about 1 minute, give or take, for Amumu to, let's say, clear his red, clear his raptors, clear his wolves. Maybe his Gromp is up. Let's say he goes Gromp, and then he's going to want to be here, okay? So if we know that Amumu wants to be here in 130, we have an incoming wave here, and we have a wave here currently. Our goal on this second wave arriving, right, and it's going to be mirrored, right, so we know that there's a second wave arriving here. Our goal as Ornn is to push this as fast as possible so that what we're doing is we're once again pinning this Garen under tower, right? And by pinning this Garen under tower, he has to make a choice between rotating to the objective or losing that farm. Now, while we're doing that, what you see at a high level is you would also see, let's say that this lane took a reset, right? So they're on their way back. They're coming back. They're about here. Let's say that Maokai and Ashe are here, right? So the proper thing to do in this instance would be to take the current wave right here, burn it as quickly as possible so that we can crash it into the tower. Now, what's going to happen is Ashe can take a reset and walk back to lane, and by the time she gets back to lane, there should be a double stacked wave arriving that she can farm safely under tower. Now, when Malachi takes his reset, it's going to take about, let's say, 15 seconds for him to do this. Let's say it takes 15 seconds for them to burn this wave and crash it, right? It's going to take an additional 8 seconds for him to back. It's 23 seconds, right? We've got a minute till grubs spawn. Well, guess what? It takes 30 seconds to walk from base and meet up with your Amumu. And now you have a 30-second timer where you can gank either top, you can gank mid, and you can set up vision for this. And now you have a 4v3 because Lux is coming out of base, assuming that there's going to be 2 people down here. She probably did not roam up, and you've guaranteed the objective for your team. Now, all of this happens based off of us paying attention to the wave states and paying attention to who we see on the map, where they are, and planning ahead, right? Now, you can make these plays, but we also need to understand that this is solo queue, right? So maybe this person doesn't want grubs. Maybe this person's 0-4. Maybe this person's 0-3. Okay, so what that means is that this entire side, whether you have a numbers advantage or not, is probably weak-sided, because maybe all of these people don't have ult and maybe all of them are behind. So you just continue to play in your winning lane as the Malachi, right? And then you're happy because you don't throw with all of these other people who are bots in your game, right? It all depends on how the game is playing out, but what we're talking about right now, is simply optimal strategies that you can set up in order to play the game at a high level and pay attention to those macro decisions so that you know whatever decisions you're making when you're walking out of base are informed and you have a plan for what's happening in the next 1 minute, 2 minutes of the game, right? If you play directly with what's in front of you all the time, then inevitably you end up behind, and when you end up behind, you end up feeling like you have no control over the game. So that's where this aspect of map awareness kind of comes in. So let's talk about what happens if we end up in that situation where we got all 4 people up here, right? Okay, great. So we have 4 people up here. Well, Nidalee reversed her clear, and she said, I'm not going to contest grubs. This is really scary. They have too much CC. We don't win this 3v3. I also don't think we win this 4v3, so I'm just going to bail. I'm going to go invade these raptors and maybe look for some sort of dive. Okay, so then what is Ash's options here, right? Hypothetically, she's got 3 people coming in. Maybe she saw Nidalee crossover a ward here and go into the jungle here. So she really only has 3 things she can do on weak side. And the first thing to understand is this concept right here, which is that it is not your job to be the greatest player in the world and win the 1v2 or 1v3 when you are weak-sided. Your first job as a weak side player when you see a position like this on the map is to not die. Not die. Your team is going to get something up here. The only way the enemy team gets anything back besides maybe a plate or 2 or first tower, right? You're trading objectives. The only thing that makes it worse is if you trade the objectives and you lose first tower and you die, right? Because now they've gotten everything they want instead of only half of what they want. So how do we do that? Well, first off, we pay attention, right? We saw Nidalee cross over. It would be a really good idea to throw a hawk shot here and see if maybe she's backing after these raptors, or is she headed down towards you, right? Let's use our abilities to prep this. If she's headed down towards you, you just back off. You completely back off this and you just leave it alone, okay? Your goal is not to be a hero here. Now, hypothetically, let's say that that's not the case. Let's say that Nidalee is on her way down to you and you're in this situation, right? So first, don't die. So let's say that Nidalee is backing in this instance. She's going back. Xerath is shoving mid. He's pinned under tower. So you're in a 1v2 here. Okay, your second goal is to get XP range. You have 2 champions that have a ton of poke. So what's the first rule? Don't die. So if you stand back here, realistically, Lux is going to have to walk up into tower range in order to try and poke you, right? But you're going to collect all of this XP solo. You might not get all of the gold, but by getting all of this XP solo, right, you're going to get a level advantage over this Ezreal, right? Because he's splitting his XP halvesies with the Lux. Okay, so this is a good win scenario. This is a good thing for you to do. Third would be to get CS. Okay, if you can use your W from range as Ashe in this instance to collect a few minions right here, maybe the melee minions, that's great. Maybe save your W to last hit a cannon minion here. It is a good idea for you in general to just accept the fact, if you're Ashe in this instance and there's a wave coming in, accept the fact that all of these casters you're probably going to lose. Be happy getting the XP, be happy getting the melee minions, and be happy don't dying. The worst thing you see in your games as an AD carry or as a support or as any of these 4 players is when you try to over aggress your position when you're weak sided and then you die, and guess what? They got a kill, you don't get any of the XP, and you don't get any of the CS, so now they're up in XP, they're up in gold, and you're down, right? It could have been even. It could have been a 1-for-1 exchange plus your team gets the objective. But instead, now it's just completely negative for you as an individual, as the Ashe player. And it's also not even a complete win for your team on the grubs because you traded something back on the weak side. The important thing about weak side is understanding that your job is just to survive. You don't have to win by yourself. Let your team win on the opposite side. So, let's flip that. On the other side of things, who's being strong-sided here? Well, it's pretty obvious, right? This is the strong side of the map for the blue team. We know that they're top lane, so what do? You maximize your advantage here. You saw Nidalee cross over on this ward. Okay, so if we saw Nidalee cross over on this ward, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we can secure objectives. Done. Second thing we're going to do is dive this Garen, right? I mean, we've got Maokai who can drop tower aggro, Ornn who can tank tower aggro. We've got, 5, 6 forms of hard CC. This guy is dead after these grubs, 100%, right? Or we do that same thing and we get Xerath because he's immobile, and if he's made the mistake of shoving up here and he's in this position, then let's kill him. Now, the reason why the Xerath gank is a little bit harder is because Xerath probably knows that this is his strong side, so when you guys show up to gank, he could very easily run out here. Top lane is going to be 9 times out of 10 your easiest lane to dive, and the reason being is because A, it is a 1 character lane, so you're not dealing with 2 characters who can both use abilities under a tower, and 2, there's no way for a top laner to get out of a dive except in one direction, right? It's very difficult. Very rarely are you going to see a top laner try to get out or successfully get out going this direction. Whereas your mid laner has this direction, they have this direction, they have this direction, they have that direction, right? All depending on where they're positioned. This could be a very difficult gank to coordinate with all of your members to actually trap this player, right? So that's your second option here, right? First, we secure the objective. Second, we dive if possible. Third, we gank if possible, right? If he's shoved up here, right? And Ornn went to grubs, and now Ornn is coming back, or, right, etc. The only difference between the dive and the gank is one's happening under tower, and one's happening up in an extended lane state in terms of positioning. So the next thing that you can do directly after that, let's say that Garen's not in lane, he's back here. Let's say that Xerath's not in lane, they're back here, they're walking back to lane. Okay, well, realistically, probably not ganking them then. What we're probably going to look to do is we're going to look to crash these waves and get resets off for our solo laners. Our support is going to back and then go to support the bot laner, right? Because now this wave has crashed, they've collected it, and they're about to start shoving out. So they need their support back here so they can play the 2v2. Now, As the jungler, because you know that Nidalee cross-mapped and you got the objective here, you should do a quick invade. Now, a quick invade means that you go and you check one of these camps. You're not trying to see if you can get 1, 2, 3 camps, because by the time you do that, you're actually going to be caught out and you're going to mess up your reset tempo, right? And your timer to get off the map in terms of strong side. So what you're doing is you're looking at one of these 3 camps to see if they're up, or just putting a ward down if you have one deep in the jungle to help your team out so that they don't continue to play without the knowledge of where the enemy jungler is, right? That's your 4th option here. Now, all of this happens based on what we said earlier, where we are paying attention to the mini-map and we are paying attention to where we're spotting people on wards, right? Like the Nidalee, where the waves are, so we can coordinate with our actual lanes in what they're trying to achieve, whether we're pinning people to tower, whether we know that our AD carry is going to be safe under their tower, whether we have priority here to roam with our mid laner, etc. All very important. So really start thinking about how to read the map so that you, as the AD carry, top laner, mid laner, jungler, support, etc., know how you're playing off of these waves so that you can set up what you want to do next. Okay? So we'll kind of move to the next section here. And the next section is matchups. This is very important, but very kind of difficult when a lot of people look at their specific roles. So what we know about this is that in the early game, Ornn is stronger than Garen, okay? But as the game progresses, it's a lot harder for Ornn to actually deal with Garen because he gets so fast that he can just kind of zip all over the place, right? So what we know is early game, we have priority top, okay? Early game, we have what should be a 1 matchup unless Nidalee outplays, so we'll say that this is a skill matchup. Mid lane, Hwei has better wave clear early than Xerath, so we have priority here. We have priority here early. But in the bot lane, the red side has priority because they have a double ranged comp, right? Which means that they have the ability, because we only have 1 ranged laner here, in order to push in this bot lane. So they're going to have bot lane priority, right? So now we need to make a decision at the beginning of the game as the junglers on what do we want to do. Nidalee may want to gank top lane because she knows that this Ornn is going to be shoved up. Maybe that's her plan. Or maybe her plan is simply to path this way so she can hover for a counter gank in this bush and defend her bot lane when they have the enemy bot lane pushed in. Either is a viable option, but we need to understand what they're trying to do based on their starting position in the beginning of the game. Now, likewise, for our Amumu, right? Our Amumu could be looking to go bot lane and then path top lane because they want that guaranteed scuttle, because they know that this player is going to be pinned under tower and they can have a 2v1 in the river. Or maybe it'd be pretty difficult to dive in Garen early game, so I wouldn't recommend that. But maybe what they're looking to do is they're looking to path opposite side because they think that Ornn can survive the gank on his own. They want this scuttle, and they know that the bot lane is going to be shoved up, so they want to look for an early game gank so that way they can alleviate some of this pressure for their bot lane and potentially blow summoners and get a kill, right? These are the options in the first first 3 to 4 minutes of the game, right? And it's all based on the matchups in champ select. So quite often what you see is when people are doing champ select, they're picking their champions and they're thinking about all of their matchups in isolation, and they're going, okay, Well, yeah, I'm aware of the map. I know what's going on. I know what's going on. You know, everybody's in their lanes, etc. But what you need to know about your lanes is you need to know who has the ability to move. Because realistically, if Garen does get half health, right, early game up here, and he's under tower, that's not gonna do much unless Hui shoved in mid lane with a double stacked wave, has a 20-second roam timer. Your Amumu just showed up and got Scuttle Crab at 3:30. Your Ornn has this shoved up. It's a triple or double stacked wave, right? And Garen's here with half health. Well, a 3v1 dive at, 340 is pretty bad, especially if this guy took Ignite and now he loses all of this XP, and unless this Ornn messes up, this guy is completely out of the game, right? And Hui still has enough time to make it back in time to catch this wave once it gets back, unless Xerath has like amazing shoving capability, which early game he doesn't really do that much damage to the wave. Okay, these are the kind of things you need to be paying attention to early in the game when it comes to map awareness, so that way you have the ability to respond to the movement around the map correctly and you don't end up screwed. Okay, now this is something that people pay attention to in high elo, but in low elo I see this very, very rarely, where people are thinking about the actual 3v3, 2v2, 3v3 with this angle, etc. They're very much looking at just their isolated matchup and nothing else. And then when the jungler shows up, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm getting camped. I can't believe it. And it's like, well, you're not playing an isolated game, right? At some point, this is going to happen. At some point, jungle and mid is going to happen, right? It is all overlapping, right? And then this kind of ties in with that, or maybe even all four, right? These are all things that happen, and you see them happen in your game all the time. So start thinking about this during champ select so that you know how to adapt your play as the game goes. Now, obviously, things are going to go wrong, and all you can do is consider what next. If this guy's 4-0, and this guy's 0-4, it changes the way you play the game. If this person's 10-2, right, it changes the way you play the game. But the fundamental decision making that's coming behind the matchup analysis translates to any game state. Whether your teammates are fed, whether you're fed, or whether everybody's losing, it informs how you want to play the game. If I have this comp and I'm losing, I'm going to take 4 people with hard CC and I'm going to start moving them around the map and solely looking for picks on maybe groups of 3 or groups of 2, right? Because in terms of isolated lane matchups, we're kind of screwed. There's not much we can do, right? Now, obviously, you don't want to give up waves and you still need to collect XP and gold, but, adapt your strategy. Think about these things. So, the next part that we will move on to here is going to be what I like to call the solo queue problem, which we alluded to several times during this, but specifically what the solo queue problem is it's this. This is the same exact diagram that we were looking before, where grubs are spawning, right? But wait a second. Nidalee didn't counter jungle. Nidalee just continued to do her full clear. Our support didn't roam up. Our top laner's still top. Our mid laner's still mid. No one's coming to help the jungler, right? This isn't happening at all. No one managed their wave states, etc., right? Can't believe that in solo queue we're not playing with organized professional players. What the heck? What the heck? Can't not believe it. It is crazy. But that's why you will not have teammates who play correctly. Everything we just talked about is in an ideal game state, and you do your best to get close to the ideal by playing correctly. But that's not going to always be the case. Sometimes you just have teammates that are bad. So what do? You ping respectfully, and you turn your flippin' chat off. Stop typing to people. The essay that you're writing is not going to do anything but upset anybody. It's not going to do anything but make people play worse. It's going to force people to stop looking at their spacing, stop focusing on their champ, open chat, try to type before they open chat, waste their sums, not pay attention to a skill shot coming their way. Anything with chat is simply taking your focus off of the actual game, okay? So if you're typing, stop. Just ping. Okay, ping that you want this shoved, ping that you want this shoved, ping assist, 3 times on the grub so people know what you're asking them to do. And then if they don't do it, they don't do it, okay? Word correctly so that you have information to know, hey, where is this player? Where are they? What are they doing? Are they going to contest me here? Am I going to be okay as a Mumu? As a bot lane, is Nidalee up here? Is Nidalee down here? Are we about to get ganked? Can we play aggressively with an all-in and a 2v2? Or is this going to turn into a 3v2? These are things you need to know. These are things you need to pay attention to. So word correctly, ping respectfully to try and get your teammates to work together. And guess what? If they don't want to, they're not going to. You do what you can. If you believe as the Amumu you can win this 1v1, then take it, okay? If you believe you're the better player and this Nidalee's going to miss all of her stuff, then kill her, right? Great. And then get the grubs. Great. You don't need your team. But otherwise, adapt your strategy. Give the grubs or maybe try to smite one away and then just fall back and go back to your bot side jungle with a tempo advantage to try and make something happen down here. Adapt, okay? If you're Ornn and you see this happening in River and you go, oh crap, well I'm back here but I don't want to help him, well then at least pull back so that you're not going to get collapsed on and lose a 2v1 and make the situation worse. Adapt. Same for the Hui, right? Adapt. These are the things that you as these individual players need to do, but also the things you need to do based on when you have teammates that are not playing correctly around objectives and that are not doing what they're supposed to do, okay? Maybe an Ashe arrow could have came. Maybe an Ashe E could have gone, but it didn't, okay? They don't know what they're doing. That's fine, right? Play around what you can. If you're the Ashe and you have a support that's like, I'm not going to do anything, throw your arrow out, ping to go in. Take this fight in the extended lane state on the person who has low mobility, right? Maybe just try to burn a sum. So that way, after your Amumu does the one grub and then comes back bot, you can say, hey, we got Lux's flash out, okay? We would like you to come gank now. Ping for that, okay? Adapt your wave management. Like I said, don't just shove up mindlessly as the solo laners here if Nidalee's fed and you think that after grubs she can initiate a gank on you. Pay attention to what is going on the map, right? And most importantly, above all, you just have to do what you can, okay? Do what you can, guys. Don't force yourself into a position where you're looking at this map and you're going, well, I have to do grubs, and then this guy's shoved up and this guy's shoved up, but I don't have priority, so like I'm just gonna force it because these guys messed up, but they should be here. Well, they're not there, okay? Which means that you can't do this because you can't win a 3v1. So don't do it. Do what you can, which is go back and recycle your camps and look for a gank bot. Okay? Understood? Like, don't try to force priority if you're behind and too weak to fight these people, because then you're just gonna die in a solo lane, right? And that doesn't help anybody. So do what you can, right? If all of this is happening on the opposite side of the map and Nidalee has been living in your bot lane, but she's not there currently, right? Because everybody's topside, take this time to try and get a shutdown. Try and blow up one person. Do what you can, right? If they don't have the survivability to, you know, live. If you go all in on one person, then do what you can. Try and make a move, right? If you don't, then you're just going to end up passively losing here, passively losing here because we killed ourselves, passively losing here because we killed ourselves, passively losing here because we overforced something that we couldn't, and we didn't take advantage of the one area of opportunity where maybe we could have made something happen, right? Now, this is all assuming, right, that this team is winning and everything else. But if we are winning, then it becomes opposite, right? They can't force on you. They can't force on you without the threat of dying. You move up. Now it's the 3v1 for Nidalee. Nidalee should back off. If not, you kill her, right? And because your bot lane is weak-sided, maybe you make a play here. But if you're super behind bot and you know your team is just winning everything over here, just hold XP, get whatever CS you can, don't die, give up the casters, and then that's fine, right? And then when your Amumu comes back bot side, then maybe you can look for something, right? Because you can be weak-sided even though it's still an even 2v2 if you're the weaker lane, alright? The strong side is whatever side the jungler is on, right? So these are both strong sides for both teams. It just happens that your team is the stronger of the strong sides because you have winning lanes, okay? But this is still weak side. Make sense? All right. So that's kind of it for the stuff here. So I'm going to go in chat and we'll do questions for a couple minutes here. Okay, so let's look through what we've got here. All right, so someone asked a question and they were like, what about if you're the Amumu and all of your lanes are losing? Okay, so let's say all of your lanes are losing here, right? Fine. So if that's the case, you're not going to have priority in any of these lanes, right? They're all going to be shoved up. Well, you can maybe transition this into a gank mid, right? Because he has low mobility, you have good hard CC with Hwei, and you also have good hard CC with Amumu, right? So because you have more hard CC here, there's a good chance that you transition this into a gank to try and get your Hwei back into the game a little bit and try and get him in a better position. Now, if that doesn't work and you're like, no way, not capable because this is warded, they put a pink here, I can't do anything there, then it's exactly what we talked about earlier. You simply reset and try to use that tempo advantage to do something on the map somewhere against one of the lanes you know you can impact, right? Because you're not going to impact top, because if this guy's ahead, he's too mobile and he's too tanky for you to do anything here. So it's not really a gankable lane, even if he's pushed all the way up. Plus, your Nidalee is close enough, and if she's also ahead with the head laners, that this could turn into a really messy 2v2. So you play opposite of the enemy jungler, so that way you can make something happen. Alright, let's look at another question. Okay, so this is all map awareness, but these are all things that we can do, but what if we're not in the right position to do them? Okay, so I think I understand what your question is. Your question is if I'm looking at the minimap and this is what I'm seeing, but if I'm the Maokai and I didn't get my bot lane in a position to get up here, and these guys didn't take a reset like what we said earlier and everything, then how do we impact the map? And that's where we come back to the point of do what you can, right? If you weren't able to get an ideal situation down where now everything can happen exactly as you want with all these lanes shoved up and you have the 4v3 or the 4v1 or the 4v2 here or whatever, then your goal is to do what you can, right? And what that is exactly what we talked about earlier, where maybe you get the immobile person, you're able to trade a kill. Maybe you can at least blow a sum, so that way if your Amumu does do something, it works out. Now, maybe your Amumu does nothing. Maybe everybody dies up here, and maybe you die here going for the engage, and you die here because there's literally nothing you can do. That's okay. It's solo queue, right? You are going to have games that are just so far behind that there's nothing you can do. But you need to take these windows of opportunity so that the games where it is 50-50, right? You can tip the scales and make it, 60-40, and now there's a higher percent chance that you're coming out to win, right? At the end of the day, every game is 50-50 when it starts, and the people who can seize these little opportunities where it's like +2, +5, +10, whether that's an objective or a level lead or a gold lead or Baron or whatever it is, that's the team that wins the game, okay? There are very, very few compositions and very, very few champions in this game where you're going to get to 30 minutes or 20 minutes after losing every lane because you took no action and you did nothing, and then you're magically just gonna push the game back in the next 5 to 10 minutes and you're going to now win the entire game. It is extremely rare. Look at it this way. Even if you have this team and they're all behind, if you never grow up as 5 and you never use this 5v5 insane team composition at a Dragon or a Baron or Grubs or Rift or Elder or whatever, because you're not willing to actually go in and make a decision and commit, it doesn't matter that you have the better teamfight comp because you are passively losing the game with inaction. Now, the best thing about being someone who takes action based on map awareness and someone who takes action based on executing plans is if you have a plan and it doesn't work and you go, wow, my plan didn't work, you can revisit this later and ask why and become a better player. But if you have no plan and you do nothing, then you're literally coin flipping every game. If you're the Ashe, hoping that you have 4 better players. If you're the Amumu, hoping that you have better laners, right? If you're the mid laner, hoping that you have a better jungler and better teammates, right? Like, and hoping that you win that coin flip is not how you're going to win your games. There's quite often it's said there's the 30% of the games you win, 30% of the games you lose, and 30% of the games you have control over, right? By taking action, these 30 games you're going to get more control over and you're going to win. And if you can get a 60% win rate over time, guess what? You're for sure on your way up the ladder, okay, to the rank you want. So that's kind of my answer for that. I know that was a little bit of a long-winded answer. All right, let's see what else we have in terms of questions. In terms of jungler tracking, what happens when someone changes their path? That's a great question. So we talked about this a little bit. I'm going to go back to this slide here, where obviously, right, we're going through our path, we have options here, etc. But let's say at 420 when the buffs respawn, maybe this person is doing this, and then they wait and they get this buff, and then they do some stuff around here, and then by the time they get back bot, their entire camps are respawning down here, but they want to make a play on top side again, and their Gromps and Raptors have respawned because they took so long topside, even though they're not supposed to. So they reverse their clear, right? And now they do this, and then they start pathing towards bot side. The easiest way to answer this question is like, well, what do you do and how do you know? Wards. If you have the opportunity to push up in a lane and you are not getting deep vision, you are handicapping your entire team because you are not setting up to track this player, okay? You want to know where the jungler is, and junglers can do really tricky things if you don't keep your eyes on them. So your goal is to get deep vision so that you understand where this person is. This is made even easier nowadays at the fact that there are jungler timers. So you can see, oh, this is respawning in 15 minutes, which means that it was cleared probably a minute ago or so, right? Which means that this Nidalee is either bot side right now or on her way to top, right? So these are the kind of things that you want to know, right? Let's say that it has a 15-second timer or something. I don't know the specific reset timer of Raptors off the top of my head, but you get the general idea, right? So the idea is that this is going to be for your early game specifically, and if you can control the first 5 minutes of the game perfectly, that sets you up for a really good game going forward. But as the game progresses, these deep vision wards become all that more important, because they are what is going to allow you to play the game aggressively and make hard, plays based on where the jungler isn't, if you have a lane position to do so. And likewise for the jungler, same for invades, right, to steal away camps, ganks on the opposite side of the map, etc. Okay, so we've got 5 minutes left. I really appreciate you guys showing up for this. I will keep doing these. I will post this to the YouTube channel, for anybody who didn't make it. And I hope that this kind of helps give you a brief overview of what map awareness and checking your mini map and understanding kind of how to play out the early game based on matchups and map awareness. Next video, we will go over another general concept that applies to all lanes. So thank you guys. Strike with Strike Gaming, and I will see you guys in the next one.